Today, I'll be talking about a famous article by John Hyam called From Boundlessness to Consolidation. This was an idea that Hyam came up with as a way of conceptualizing a major shift occurring in American politics and society. It's really useful because this idea of the society moving like a pendulum between boundless periods and periods of consolidation helps us simplify and group together big sets of changes happening in various realms of society. And in Hyam's case, he was interested in the period before the Civil War. He argued that prior to the late 1840s, America had been in a period of great expansion of every kind. This feeling that Americans could, Americans were spreading across the continental United States. They were uh, gripped with the idea of manifest destiny, that they were destined to inhabit the continent from coast to coast. There was an idea of perfectionism that was manifest in things like transcendentalism and various practical reform movements in the United States. Um, but all of that ferment in the first part of the 19th century, he saw as gradually giving way to a preference for what he called consolidation. And that was a desire for order, for internal regulation, and regulation of society, and different attitudes about organization and um, institutional control over human life. So I think that his basic idea is very relevant to what's happening in the Trump era. I think that for a very long period of time now, Americans have been experiencing a culture of boundlessness, and that real changes in American society have expanded our sense of possibility and expanded our real activities, practically what our life is like. I think that for many people, it has felt increasingly boundless. And we can see that in things like changes in sexual mores, attitudes toward drug use. You can see it in things like the growth of the internet, um, what we think the federal government can accomplish, our attitudes toward immigration, the flow of refugee populations around the world, even really noble things like humanitarianism can be seen as embracing an ideal of boundlessness. Um, but I think that in recent years, there really has been a shift in American society toward consolidation. And I think that it's part of human nature to get tired of living in a society that feels boundless. In our case, that even included things like COVID, which broke down our typical ideas about work, rituals about how we engage with one another were dramatically broken down during this period. And I think that after a certain point, it's very wearing for human beings to live in a culture that has so much boundlessness. And that what we're experiencing now is this drive toward consolidation, which is putting a limit on boundlessness. Whether it's whether it's the idea that the federal government is too big, that federal deficits are not acceptable, that the aims of federalism are too expansive, that we shouldn't be trying to help people overseas anymore. These are all ideas that signify a drive toward consolidation, shutting our borders, being tired of strangers, the tendency of Americans right now to uh, kind of demonize strangers, demonize immigrants. I think that these are all aspects of a shift toward what Hayem would call consolidation. It's almost a more jaded and pessimistic view of what's possible. And that leads to limits of all kinds and a preference for drawing back from boundlessness. I think it's very important to acknowledge that this is a current in our society um, that maybe we can view as natural or inevitable, or at least part of our political tradition and our cultural tradition to go between periods of great expansiveness and something that is more hermetic and closed down. Now, from a political point of view, I think that this is important to grapple with because the Democrats are the party of boundlessness. Now, the Democrats are in danger of having to defend boundlessness, and that it's hard for Democrats to say that there must be limits on things. For example, that there must be limits on immigration into the United States, that helping everyone is not feasible, that having the government um, try to help every group of people is not feasible, and that there are trade-offs to pursuing boundlessness. Um, I think that it's very hard to make the pivot and say, oh, American voters are actually in this period where they recognize that there needs to be a a drawing in, or maybe even a lowering of our aims in order to reestablish order and to create a sense of familiarity. And those things are, and a feeling of unity of what we have in common, a sameness, a boring sameness to our society. I think that that is something that can be productive for Americans culturally, and it can be beneficial for us as a nation. Um, and that there are trade-offs, that there are trade-offs um, to pursuing boundlessness. There are some costs to it. So, given that we're heading into a period of consolidation and that we actually are well into it, thanks to Donald Trump, I think the area of really fruitful endeavor is to say, how should we be consolidating as a society? What what is a humane way of becoming more consolidated, becoming more like one another, and becoming more um, more familiar with one another. I think that all of those questions are part of rebuilding trust in one another and gaining the leadership, gaining the trust of the electorate on the part of leaders. I don't think that that's very easy to do. So that would be my brief take on this idea of going from boundlessness to consolidation. And I think that the Democratic leaders who were able to um, justify taking up positions that involve consolidation. So examples of it would be something like Social Security is in trouble. We want Social Security. Social Security is going to run out of money. We don't want that to happen. We don't want an undue burden on younger people. We don't want older people to be deprived of dignified old age. How do we how do we consolidate and create a different kind of Social Security that is limited? And how do we do that? I think that is that type of dialogue is what needs to be happening in the Democratic Party. And it's not really happening, whether it has to do with the size of the federal government or its aims, the budget. How should we be cutting things? Even if the Democrats are unsuccessful in um, getting their vision codified into legislation, it's still important to be standing up for what kind of consolidation is humane, what is the most feasible type of consolidation that our society should be undertaking. Do we really need to totally axe all of USAID? Isn't there isn't there some middle ground to pursue? Those are the types of things that I think um, we end up discussing if we accept that we are now in a period of consolidation and we are no longer in a period of boundlessness. So thank you for listening to what I have to say. I hope you tell me what you think in the comments. And if you find anything of value in this recording, I hope you share it with someone you know. Thank you very much, and I hope to talk to you again. Thanks.